by Tom Spitalere of Essex County Ghost Projects, and myself, your host, Bob Mcdermott. We're going to be a podcast and a show that's really dedicated to giving a voice to the entire paranormal community. So we encourage witches and Bigfoot investigators, UFO investigators, mediums, psychics, anyone that's in the paranormal to call in. We'll set it up. We'll have an hour show. It's a podcast that will appear on things like YouTube and LCAT eventually. If you'd like to call in or you'd like to be on the show, send an email to paranormal, PARANORMALNH @yahoo.com, and we'd be happy to get back to you. I'm going to let Tom introduce our next guest. We're real excited about our next guest. He is a renowned demonologist, and I'll let Tom introduce him. Tom?
Well, before we do that, Bob, I want to just talk a little bit more about the Paranormal News Zone. We have him coming on in about 4 or 5 minutes because I just want to make sure our great listeners that will be listening to the show know what we're going to be doing. We'll have podcasts weekly, right, Bob? You and I. We've known each other, 20 years at least now? Wow.
Long time.
Yeah, I feel old now. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Age is catching up to us. Yeah, age is just a number. But for all you people out there, again, we like to have everybody on in the paranormal, zone that's out in the paranormal. And if you have anything you're doing with nonprofit work and you want to email us what you're doing, we'll put it out on the podcast for you too, and have you on the air too to talk about it.
Yeah, I think it's also noteworthy to say to people that, if you've written a book or you have a show or anything else that you'd like to promote, and you come on our show and tell us your story, you can also promote your books or your events or whatever without any problem. So feel free to send the email and get on the show as soon as possible.
Yeah, no, that's going to be fun. This show is a long time coming, and the podcast studio is located at 468 Essex Street, Lawrence, Mass., inside Lawrence Community Access TV. So, if you're a local person listening in and you want to come into the studio when we do these, you're more than welcome to, too. Or you could call in. We're going to make it easy for everybody, aren't we, Bob?
Yeah, no, that's a great way to go. I think technology has really helped in the world of paranormal. When you think that before communicating years ago was difficult, now, for example, you can come on and remain anonymous if you want to. So if you're in a job that you don't want people to know about what you're doing, you can come on anonymously and tell us your story that way also. So technology has really helped a lot.
Exactly, and we don't have a problem with anonymous people coming on either.
Right.
It is what it is. That's what this field's all about. Because as you know, Bob, when we have house investigations and you have UFO investigations, not everybody wants their first and last name and home address out there. That's for sure.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's understandable. I find that on other shows I've done, especially with witches, they have professions, and sometimes they want to keep those two lives separate.
Correct.
They're reluctant to come on a TV show type because then people recognize it. But they could come on this show, and no one would really know who they are because they have such an interesting story to tell. And it's a story that's not out there all the time because of that issue.
Right, exactly. And there are people, I did a podcast show years ago, Bob, where I had somebody come on after double checking the story, and I've said this before, that in the late 70s there were Bigfoot sightings in Haverhill, and this guy actually witnessed them, but he was with people of interest in the community that later became people of interest. They were kids at the time. So to keep everybody's safe name, we used his middle name only during the podcast.
Yeah, there you go.
And we can do that again. As long as, the story sort of checks out, we'll run it.
Yeah. Well, again, it goes to communications.
Yeah.
It gives people a chance to tell their story. And the way that we've set this up, Tom, as you well know, is that you can do it from the comfort of your own home if you really want to do it that way. So you don't have to travel. You don't have to leave your house. You can call in, and we'll network everybody in. So that's really a big step forward in technology.
Oh, it's a huge step in technology, and and we're still working on some technology here too. I mean, this show will eventually grow, and grow. Today's our first episode, and I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, I am too. I'm looking forward to the subject. I think the subject is something that within the world of paranormal that we don't talk a lot about, because I think there's very few experts such as Carl out there today.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very interesting subject.
Oh, demonology is very interesting, and I've known Carl Johnson a very long time. I'll do a quick intro on Carl because he'll be calling in a few minutes. If I told him about 10 minutes into the show. We're almost there, believe it or not, because we started a few minutes off. But Carl Johnson is a lifelong paranormal investigator, and at the age of 18, Carl got a phone call from the Perron family. I don't know if you know who the Perron family are, if anyone's listening. If you ever seen the movie Conjuring #1 in Rhode Island, the Harrisburg, Rhode Island case, Carl and his twin brother Keith were the first investigators. They went up to the Massachusetts College in Wakefield, that was in Wakefield, Mass. At the time, from Rhode Island, to go listen to Ed and Lorraine Warren. They were the ones that brought Ed Warren and Lorraine Warren onto that case. And since then, he's published a book. And I don't have the book in front of me, but he published it with a demonologist from Chicago. And he's been on the first couple seasons of the famous TV show, The Ghost Hunters.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean...
Ghost Hunters really, Tom, were kind of the fathers of the whole televised paranormal world.
Right.
We started this whole thing, 20 years ago?
Yeah, 20 years ago. Seems like it was just yesterday, wasn't it?
Yeah. An interesting tie to Carl Johnson is that, of course, those two guys came out of Rhode Island.
Right.
And I happen to know them because of a job I had in Rhode Island for 10 years. I got to meet them through business outside of the world of paranormal. So they were the most interesting two people that you'd ever want to talk to.
Oh, they are the most two interesting people. And out of both brothers, Carl is the definite most interesting person you want to talk to.
Yeah. You know what? Someday in the future, we'll get those two guys on.
Yeah, together. But today we're going to have Carl on today. And, Rhode Island is the hub for this. I mean, Rhode Island has the most graveyards per capita than any other state in the Union. There, we're just killing a little airtime before Carl gets on. But also, Rhode Island was home to werewolves, as we know, and vampires. Oh, hold on 1 second. Is this the famous Carl Johnson?
It's one of them. Probably the most famous Carl Johnson. Yeah. That's it is.
Well, Carl, welcome. We're here on with Bob, the co-host of the show, Bob Mcdermott. Say hi to Bob.
Hi, Bob. How you all doing
Thank you for coming on.
over there?
It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I gotta say this so everybody knows what's going on. This is coming in great sound over the air. We got Carl on one phone, and we got my co-host on the other phone for today. So, what technology can do what we couldn't do 20 years ago, huh, guys?
Yeah.
We were still dialing internet connections. 30 years ago we were.
Oh yeah, that's right. AOL dial-up. I forgot about that.
You remember? Yeah. I'd almost forgotten about
dial-up. We couldn't do what we're doing.
Shut off.
No, we couldn't do what we're doing today with dial-up.
Carl, when I was kind of looking at the background for this podcast, just a couple of things jumped out at me. But I think the main thing was being a neophyte to this. The definition has in it the study of demons within religious beliefs. And when I read that the first time, Carl, I really didn't sink in. But the second time I thought, that's interesting that, because as you all know better than anyone, the paranormal bumps up against religion all the time for lots of reasons. But how is it that demons bump up against religion? I mean, I know that the history of the devil, and we call it by different names and so forth within religion, but what about demons in general?
No, let me turn up my volume now. I got to put that speakerphone so I can hear better. Hello there.
All right, can you hear us now better?
Oh, I can hear Tom very loud, though. Couldn't hear.
Okay.
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Bob, say one word real quick. We're still working out some glitches.
Okay, so I was talking about the study of demons being within the religious beliefs.
Yeah? Well, you're putting that in the form of a question, right?
Yes.
No. I have my definition. I mean, it's pretty, it's applicable to other people's too, but I have my definition of demonology, the way I word it is, demonology is the systematized study of the lore and cultural traditions of wicked spirits. There is applied demonology and academic demonology. So that's how I put it. And that gives a lot of margin for interpretation, but every culture, every belief system seems to have, every religious belief system has the demons, has the wicked spirits, the bad guys, the boogeymen, boogie entities. Because we are a culture, a system of cultures that is dualistic. There's this dualism that pervades all these belief systems. And that's inculcated from our earliest childhood and from evolution. And in fact, if you have read anything about it's theory, but Carl Gustav Jung's theory, especially, and Sigmund Freud theorizing about the duality in human nature, and collective memories that have been passed down. We've inherited them, not even in a conscious sense, but subconsciously. This has been bred into us, you could say. Because you look at it, we what planet did we evolve on? We have a moon in the sky. We have the brilliant sun. The sun warms us. The sun is life-giving. So we have this dichotomy ongoing of day and night. It's got life and death, which eventually begets angels and demons. You've got darkness, you've got light. Light is preferable to the darkness, but you can't have darkness without light. You can't have light without darkness. Otherwise, just monochromatic. And so we've got this. This has been our heritage, that we have opposites, especially that of life and death. That's mysterious. That's like third down on the tier. First is, like you've got sunlight and you've got night, and that's necessary. And you have daylight, where we can see our way around and we can gather food and hunt for animals. And then you've got night, where we have to go inside our cave or our hut and hide away from the animals that are out there, which was, of course, a cogent threat, going back 20,000 years plus. And so we've always got these opposites. And it is natural that in a spiritual sense, angels and demons should evolve, a belief in angels and demons. How do we explain this? There's good and evil. That's another dichotomy. Good and evil. Good means convenient, life, affirmative. And evil is like everything we don't like, everything that's inconvenient. Hunger, pestilence, famine, and applied demons to those blights. So we've always got this going back and forth, this yin-yang. So now we have to explain bad things that happen. Why do we have these plagues? They were mysterious. Why do plagues come around and wipe out? In Europe, 2/3 of the population. In Italy, it was actually higher during what we call the medieval times, Middle Ages. And then later on in the 1600s, and they had the Great Blight, the Great Plague. So we can't explain these things easily. Like, where is God? God is the force for the good. Okay, now we got it. God's punishing the wicked. And therefore, we're all being punished because we're all wicked. And the demons do the dirty work. So we have we have these explanations for things we can't understand. So it is just born into us to believe in spirits of good and evil. They are good and evil as concepts personified, take on personalities. So to me, that's where the demons come from. I think it can be explained. I think it can be readily understood. So since we're intellectual beings with emotions and value systems, we have to have the good spirits, we have to have the bad spirits. And also,
so Carl, is that bred into each one of us versus, say, the demons, which I think a lot of people, like myself, that don't understand it, think that demons really are individuals.
What do you mean as far as they actually exist?
Yeah, do they actually exist? Right. In other words, we're taught the devil exists, and he was a cast out of heaven, and so forth and so on. And so he exists. Do other demons like the devil exist?
Well, that's a cultural thing as far as being cast out of heaven. Although a lot of ancient religions, going back to Zoroastrianism, and ancient Persian beliefs, in what was being, the belief system being developed in ancient Mesopotamia, because all Mesopotamia would be ancient. So it's nothing new, but a cultural thing would be Christianity. You've got the angels under Lucifer. They rebel in heaven and they are cast out. God's had enough of them trying to usurpation and cast them out, and one of the heavenly host are banished to the nether regions, which means underneath, and they are the fallen angels. Now, you might think that's purely a Judeo-Christian belief, but it's been replicated. It's most religious systems have something like that, and I mean quite a majority that that there is Buddhism is somewhat different, I will say, and that's a major religion, but a major belief system. But most of them have their war in heaven in this celestial rebellion, and they were cast out. Now, you look at it, that does seem to make sense. Objectively, when you believe in it. Well, my look at it is when something is believed in a widespread sense and strongly enough, it takes on its own evanescent reality. It becomes real. And I'm not saying imagine. I'm not saying there's no wicked spirits and angels are of the imagination, but they become real. There's a principle called the untrue truths, and that if something is adhered to and believed in for long enough and by enough people, it does become real. I think as human beings, we have the propensity to do something like that, to create our own spirits. And it's not just mythology. That has a quantum basis to it, and there's, psychokinesis and all those principles of, creating things with one's mind. And that's how they become real. Now, do I believe that demons were created by, they were angels that were created by God? It's the big do not know. I wasn't there for it. Can't say. I tend to take a more prosaic view of it, that we have created these things with our minds because we need to explain the mysteries of nature and of creation, and they're not readily explained. But once you have a religion, once you have a faith that says, well, demons do bad things to people, and they make plagues, and they, blights and famines, or the demons, then suddenly the world makes sense. I got it. Yeah, okay. All right, God, you're in control. This makes sense. And, I don't mean to be just like, this intellectual type person that, I'm beyond belief. No, there are strange things. There are things we will never be able to understand, things that we cannot. But they are, they're inextricably intermeshed with the human psyche. So I do take that kind of view that we've created these things and they become real. I don't believe that demons predated the human race. Yeah, and I say demons Hey, what are we going to say? We don't have clinical terminology for this. You know, you got to say the boogies, the evil spirits, the demons. And etymological, demon has an interesting origin in itself. We could do a whole show on why do they call them demons? You know, where did that come from?
And some people in the field call them parasites too. I've heard that word.
Could be parasites because they draw on living persons, draw on our vital energies. Now, also, I'd like to devote some of the show to another topic that's rarely touched on in these shows: 80s music. I mean, what do you think? We're not done with 80s music. I mean, I started going out to clubs in the 80s, and I still think it has a purpose. I think it has a place in our society, 80s music. Right, Tom?
I guess you're right about that one, Cal.
Yeah.
I love 80s
music.
music.
To that. I mean, you know, you talk about Wham, and it goes like that. They were the bomb. They were it when they came out. You know?
They were.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's your show. I don't want to get too. Okay, we'll do 80s music later.
Yeah, we'll do 80s music another day.
If you've got something to play, we could get into that now.
Right.
You know.
But Carl, I know you've been doing this. How many years you've been doing this now?
Enough to drive me insane, obviously. So, actually, I can give you a time for that. Let's see. Let me see if I can tell you precisely. 50. It's been Jeepers Crow 55 years. 54 years. I don't want to age myself.
54 years.
54 years. Wow.
Which is true because I don't even look 54.
No, you don't. Don't look a day over 40. You look younger than I do.
But, you know, it depends on the light. You know, the dimmer is the lighting in the room, I think the better I look.
Oh, so Carl. Yeah, Carl.
Excuse me, Tom.
Yeah.
Just a quick thought, Carl. When you look at characters like Jeffrey Dahmer and Jack the Ripper and John Gacy and those type of serial killers, do you think that these people are taken over by demons?
No. Do you think they are demonically possessed or demonically controlled?
Yes.
In a word, no, because I think there is enough malice and enough deviation in the human mind, the human psyche, to explain these things. So you've got extreme examples like demagogues like Adolf Hitler, Idi Amin, you say, how can somebody do this on their own? There has to be some dark power manipulating them. I can see it. I can see the devil working through them. And the Jeffrey Dahmer and,
Jack the Ripper.
David Berkowitz. Now, of course they were possessed. You could see it in their eyes. No, I think human beings are quite capable of such evil. I mean, deviant, yeah, that's not your average person by any means. But once you
would think that maybe it's more mental illness than it is demonic possession.
Yes, I do. I do think so. But it is very easy to paint a scenario and make it seem like demons are the devil is pulling the strings in these persons. Like, the approach of, say, Ed and Lorraine Warren, especially Edward Warren, being a demonologist, he could say, this person would seem to go into a trance, and before he killed or before he abducted, and he said the voices were talking to him. The voices told him, like, Son of Sam, David Berkowitz, and and they could show a picture of him. Look at his eyes. You see the demon there, and yet he recanted all that. Said he was demon possessed at the time. Repented, which is true. David Berkowitz, in prison, but he just seemed to turn his life around and confessed to a lot of this, and said how terrible it was that he did these things, and he felt compelled to. Now, it all depends on the light, the filter you show on this reasoning. If you have somebody charismatic like Edward Warren, with his booming voice standing up there, showing their very interesting and entertaining slideshow, now look at this, and he said that the demon would take over him, would speak to him through his dog, and told him to do these things. But then The demon left him when he was imprisoned, and he totally took back all his evil and repented of it. Now, that's very convincing. When you're sitting in an audience and listening to that and looking at slideshows, that sells. That's believable. However, you have a clinician, you have a person that's coming from a psychological viewpoint and explains the mental aberrations, not that they'll ever be fully understood, but says how this came on and points, to multiple serial killers and their enactments, Then it's like, wait a minute, this guy was whacked. This guy was, he had a psychological aberration. He was compelled to kill. And you have extreme examples like one of the most famous, maybe the most famous, serial killer in the Western world in modern times was Ted Bundy, Theodore Bundy. This man had a very charming personality. Was a law student. The kind of guy you'd like to sit down and talk with. You meet him at a bar. Hey, yeah, let's talk for a while. He'd approach you. People where he was very disarming, very charming, especially to women. But he had this thing going on, where he was compelled to kill. But he's a real strange example, not even a classic example, because here's somebody who had a very honed personality, charming man, intelligent, reasonable, and yet he went out and murdered women. Way more than 30. He couldn't even count them. He was confessing to more and more murders towards the end of his life, buying himself time, but not sure with true confessions. I don't think that Ted Bundy was taken over by a demon. Yeah, except in the sense that he had what used to be called split personality. He had this fractured psyche, and the vicious side would surface, and it was a compulsion. He couldn't master it. He couldn't control it. He could subdue it. He could keep it submerged for a time, but only temporarily. Now, it's not that Ted Bundy was the good Ted and the bad Ted in a more empiric sense. That malice, that aberration was always there. It was never totally gone. It was always there, gestating under the surface. And he had to give vent to it. He knew eventually he had to give in to his urge to kill. So he would make times, he would plan, he would plot it, and he'd have to give in to it. Now, of course, this is a man, really without a conscience. I mean, maybe a rudimentary system of right and wrong in his mind. But he was compelled to kill. That's just the way his mind was. Now, if he was watched and monitored, and controlled, prevented from doing these things, I don't know how he would have turned out. Would he have cracked, or, would he just have lived a reasonably normal life? But he knew he could engineer things. He could manipulate his environment. He could speak out and he could kill. He became expert at that. I don't think a supernatural demon possessed Ted Bundy. I think Ted Bundy created a supernatural demon. In a quantum sense, in the displaced
so when you're called upon, Carl, to do an investigation, I know you don't want to give details into personal experiences, but can you give us a general idea of what you investigate when somebody calls you?
Like investigating a demonic situation, right, for instance? There are patterns. And believe me, it's much easier to talk about demons in a supernatural sense. Like I experienced this, which was very convincing, and that person seemed taken over by a demon. And that's basically what people wish to hear. And it's easier to digest, even though it's, horrific. But if I could outline, my encounters within the demonic realm, I will be contacted. It's usually through a friend. Nowadays it's through internet. Or, a friend of a friend will tell me this person has a real bad situation. Is there anything you can do to help them, Carl? So, I'll look into it to be sure. And a person will be, what I hear reported is that the subject generally will be woken up at night. It starts out that way. And with night terrors. But what takes this beyond mere psychology is the person wakes up with scratches on their abdomen, their legs, their arms, sometimes their face. The person, and they're generally in lines of 3, like claw marks, 3 scratch marks in patterns. And the person keeps waking up with these, and it doesn't look like they're self-inflicted. And then the person starts to see, the subject starts to see this being around them. They wake up at night, they're woken up at night, and they see the shadow form in their room. And then other criteria, marks on the wall, sometimes even writing, letters on the wall. And so it's quite obvious that this person has a demonic entity plaguing them. And then the personality changes. They become withdrawn but have violent outbursts. So the easiest answer is this person is under demonic oppression, is being possessed. But there's something far deeper going on there. Look into that person's past. That's what I will do. Okay, you've got this criteria. Yeah, this outlines demonic haunt. It's got all the stuff, all the package. But in the interview process, I try to find out how this started. When did it begin? Tell me a little bit about your background. Now tell me more about your background. In every demonic case I've ever investigated, there has been an element of psychosis or let's call it, without getting too clinical, let's call it unresolved conflict. Something went wrong and it wasn't addressed. Something happened in this person's past and some kind of trauma was inflicted, and now it's surfacing. Sigmund Freud had a quote about that, about, distress does not just go away. It comes back in an unrecognized form. I'm paraphrasing Freud. If somebody has trauma in their lives, we all have a degree of trauma. I don't think you can go to work 5 days a week, 6 days a week, and not have some trauma. Just from driving to work or family issues and all. Some people have it more extreme. I try to ascertain what happened to this person. When did the road divide? When did things start growing kaflooey? Generally, what I'll hear is, oh, no, everything was fine until I just started waking up with these scratches. And then I started seeing the figure in my room. And now it's been my child sees it. My 5-year-old sees it. Okay, wind back the clock. Go back further. When did it start? What was your home life like? When you were growing up, when you're being raised? How about grandparents? I found there's always some caveat. Something happened. Something set things off balance. And get to that. What engendered the conflict? What messed things up? And if you can get to that point, then you can unravel the mystery. You can find out, okay, this is where the demon started. And it's personified now as a demon. It's become, in the somewhat literal sense, it's become a demon. Now, there are times where somebody just has all this, these symptoms of demonic haunting, and you can't really get at it, what started it. But if you dig enough, you probably will. And if it is something where people are just being tormented and they can't find out why, I don't know, my life was pretty balanced. My life was normal until all this stuff. No, it's never just like that. It's always something. And it's not, if it is something that they just came on and
that's physicality. That's something that can be filmed or documented with the scratches. Yeah. So I guess the question I have is that do demons go after weakness?
There should be rules against that, right? The demon should. No, I'm going to subjectify the demon and say it's real, as a demon is understood to be. There should be rules against the demonic entity attacking helpless persons like children or somebody that has mental illness. Yeah, or somebody that's going through a sickness or something. They shouldn't be attacked, but there are no rules against that. No. The demon does predate the the weaker people, the ones who are, let's say, the ones who are susceptible. You know,
And that's usually where it gets real bad. When you have somebody who has emotional, or mental, or even, issues in the house, family issues, marital issues, that really that really helps those demons get their spinach, doesn't it, Cal?
That's right. I guess there are some people out there that don't have marital issues, have a pretty sound home life. I just don't know too many of them.
So
there's always some bugaboo going on, but yeah.
So
if there's conflict, that's when it tends to come out. Like I'll give you a classic case of someone I heard of that was brought to address this situation. Like everything was okay until we started hearing the bangings on the wall, and then our children are seeing the boy and the girl are seeing this shadowy form moving on. Then we saw it. We saw it going, by the doorway. Okay, the man had lost his job, had to take a lesser paying job. There was financial strife. There was a talk about that he was having an affair with another woman. These kind of things that do happen were present. And I'm looking at that. I'm saying, yeah, well, then maybe that didn't cause everything. These are symptoms. And sometimes there's also psychological or parapsychological, you call it projection. Where it's like, this problem is too much for us to deal with, these things that are happening to us, this series of misfortunes. Pin it on the demon, because then it'll make sense. And I had a case in Brooklyn, New York, with a family that, just make it go away. Just make it go away. We want our lives back, And then in the interview process, more and more came out. And it's like, the demon was a device. I'm not saying they made it up intentionally, no. But the demon was a device. Bring the team in, the parapsychological team, the paranormal team. Bring them in. Say prayers, sense the place, the house. Get the demon out of there. Because that takes the onus off of the people who are going through the conflict. Suddenly they've got a symbol. They've got an entity to point to. The demon's messing everything up. Go after the demon. Yeah. Unravel the knots at home. Unravel the psychological knots. And because I found out they had a lot in their background, so they could explain why things were going wrong. But sometimes it's much easier to say it's a demon. And the demon will give you criteria, will give you things to point at. Hey, we've got knocking on the door. We had 3 knocks, and we hear it again. Open up the door, and no one's there. Why are we waking up with scratches? First the lady of the house and the husband waking up with scratches on his neck and his arm. You tell me there's not something going on there. You say that's just a thing of the mind. I said, yeah, it's a thing of the mind. But expanded thing of the mind. It produces the demonic force. And I could lose my demonology badge for talking like this.
But that's why.
Experience 3 knocks or claw marks or shadow figures. Who do they turn to besides, say, a paranormal investigator, which, again, a lot of this follows those same lines as far as shadow figures go and certainly marks on walls and banging on doors. But shy of a paranormal investigator, who would people turn to unravel this mystery?
Well, it depends on what roadblocks they've run into. If somebody's going to see their medical doctor and they're going to see like professional psychiatrist, and they just can't get to the bottom of it, then I think it's not harmful. I think they should seek out the paranormal investigating team, because that could help. Even if it's temporarily, that could help. What I've been talking about is a lot of theory. I have moments where I say, suppose it's just as as simple as most people subscribe to parapsychology and let's say paranormal phenomena. Suppose it is that simple. Suppose the wicked spirits are coming in. I just think there's more to it than that, and a lot can be explained by psychological anomalies. But if you consult a paranormal team, they're going to do some good, you provided they're responsible and mature and aren't taking your money. You get a paranormal investigative team in. If they're worth their salt, they're going to look for causes, empiric causes for the disturbance. Is there a leak behind the wall that drips from time to time? It sounds like scratching on the wall, sounds like knocking. Are rodents creating a problem? What's in the soil of this place? What's making these people feel at ease? Do they live near, heavy discharge power lines? They'll look for that, and if they can't find anything that really explains it, they're going to bless the house. They'll say prayers around it. The house will feel lighter. People will be helped. So it becomes real, and they can do some good. I'm not saying everybody's...
I throw this question out to Tom and yourself, and certainly our listeners, if they want to chime in through emails or something. We know as paranormal investigators that the religious community is not always cooperative when we ask them to come in to pray over a house that we think may be possessed or at least have paranormal activity. So is that so? I'm throwing out to both you guys. Is that so when it comes to demonic things like this? In other words, if somebody called a priest, for example, and said, I have scratches on my neck and so forth, will that priest come out and address that issue?
Yeah, again and again, I've heard clients tell me, well, we tried to talk to our priest, or we messaged our priest, and he said he gave us some prayers to read, but then he just stopped getting back to us. He didn't come out from the house. I don't think he believes us. Well, most priests aren't trained directly in this discipline.
No, they're not.
Evil spirits, and they don't want to look bad, and it's not in their job description really to come out do house calls like that. It should be, but they also know the priest will know them. That's professional. What they do is they will know that people become obsessed with these.
Let's all agree that we're not picking on the priests or any religion here. I think it's pretty much standard through all religions. But the bottom line is they teach throughout their teachings throughout history about the devil. And they teach that how the devil can have demonic possession and so forth of people. And yet most religious folks in the religious communities will address this. It's almost contradictory.
Excuse me, I'm going to have to move this upstairs. How was your dinner? It is my landlady's birthday today. I will mention her. Okay. Oh, he's going to run. Okay. All right, I'll be back soon. Okay. Ooh.
All right, Kyle, you still there? Did we lose you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I had an interruption, but it's a nice interruption.
That's all right.
Are you going someplace? Is that
I'm going to France. I'm going to Etretat. I'm going to Versailles. I'm going to Amsterdam. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
In November.
Oh, you got quite the world tour going on. Oh, my. That's something. All right, I'll be back down in a minute. I have to go upstairs for a round in the room. Yeah.
All right.
It is my landlady's birthday today.
Oh, happy birthday to her.
Probably shouldn't. Oh, she's being sent on a tour. Yeah.
So,
okay.
Kyle, you there? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so Kyle, for our new viewers that are listening, okay, can you talk about one of the biggest cases that broke you and your brother into this field?
Oh, I think I know which one you're going to speak of. I think I know, and I'm going into my bedroom to devote time to that. Yeah. Remember when we did your Halloween show?
Yeah.
The interruptions were from tricks or treaters. That was kind of fun in its way. Yeah. Do you want to be the one to introduce the topic? I think I know which one it's going to be.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can introduce the topic. So everybody knows Cal is a great demonologist and his brother, but they got started when what? You're 18 years old and you got a call from this family, and you can take it from there. And they became overnight sensations and should have been movie heroes.
Yeah, should have been, right. This was what is now known as The Conjuring. The Conjuring case. A farmhouse in Harrisville, town and village in Burrillville, Rhode Island. And we were contacted by the lady of the house, Mrs. Carolyn Perrin. I was then a member of a team based in, my brother, we were members of a team based at Rhode Island College. And this was back in I'd been a member, started joining in 1972. I was there at Rhode Island College to hear a lecture given by Ed and Lorraine Warren. And I got to know them quite well. So I was invited that night of the lecture to join the group based at Rhode Island College, PIRO, Parapsychological Investigatory and Research Organization, PIRO. So we were exploring exterior cases, and we wanted to address a residential case, something where people had disturbance in their home, and we could go out and evaluate, give them our opinion, our assessment. To that effect, my brother placed an ad in the local paper advertising our team and saying we don't charge for investigations. Okay, 3 weeks later, Mrs. Carolyn Perrin responded to the ad. She contacted us. It was an ad placed in the local periodical. And she said that she and her husband had, a year before, purchased a farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island. Actually, at that point, it would be 2 years before, because it was between 1970 and 1971 they were purchasing this house. And they came into ownership of a house in Harrisville in 1971. And they had strange things going on in their house. They wanted a paranormal team to come in and give our opinion of it, investigate it. So that's how we came to know Mrs. Carolyn Perrin. She was interviewed first by us at Rhode Island College, and then we took what was then a long, convoluted drive out to Harrisville, Rhode Island, and conducted an investigation of her house. And yeah, they did have activity of that. We were convinced. I personally didn't think it was that horrific. Of course, I wasn't living there, so it's easy to be detached and to do an investigation. I never, and still don't think that was demonic. It was spooky. It's scary when the people are living there and there's that stuff happening. Seeing apparitions, furnishings moved about, bangings on the wall. Yeah, that's unsettling. So we came into that investigation, started it in August of 1973. I will say we never felt we were in over our heads. We were inexperienced, but we were documenting, we were assessing, taking photographs, recorded interviews. And our first time there, when we went there in August of 1973, we were conducting the interview process downstairs with Carolyn Perrin and her 5 daughters. And Roger had to leave on business at the time, Roger, her husband. And I heard moving, shuffling around upstairs. And I said, "Excuse me, Mrs. Perrin, do you have company here?" And Carolyn and the girls said, "No, we hear that almost every day. We go upstairs, nobody's up there. With different rooms, we hear motion and then nobody's there." So I waited for the interview process to recommence. And then I kind of made my way upstairs. And when I was up there, I saw this dark thing moving. It came at me. How do you describe something like this? It really didn't have a form. It was just I call it the darkening. It's like a shadow person that wasn't in a human form. And this shadowy blob came at me, and it went down where the rooms conjoin, kind of a hallway. And I thought it was that solid, or that palpable. I thought, oh, there's a fire in the house. I'm going to smell smoke. This is all of 3 seconds, And the thing came towards me and enveloped me, and I didn't smell any smoke. And I was just like, what sensation? Nothing emotional except surprise, being startled. And I don't know what that was. So I went and, told my brother about it when I went downstairs. So we conducted a successful investigation. We knew something was up there. Now look at the formula there. You have a fairly young couple, 40-ish. They moved from Cumberland, Rhode Island, to this farmhouse, taking on a lot, and they've got 5 daughters. So it's a formula for a haunting, and there was more to it that explains the haunting. So we investigated there for a month, and the next time we came back, Mrs. Perrin, Carolyn Perrin, she was already a slender woman, but she had dropped an alarming amount of body weight, and she was looking frail and rather haggard. She's an attractive woman, but she's not looking well. She looked like, is she eating okay? Is she all right? Roger had developed scratching on his forearm, so he seems disconcerted by that. So we, after a time, we decided we were going to get in touch with Ed and Lorraine Warren. Now, this was not a cry for help. We weren't saying, Warrens, help us, we don't know what we're doing. I never liked that. We were conducting, to the best of our means, a scientific paranormal investigation, as our means allowed. We were recording, we were taking pictures. One of us came up with the idea, it might have been my brother. Donna says she was our case manager. Donna says she came up with the idea. But I think my brother mentioned it first. That let's consult Ed and Lorraine, because we as a team knew Ed and Lorraine Warren. I, at that point, was more acquainted with them. And we figured it would be a nice touch to consult the Warrens and benefit from their vast experience. Just to see what they'd say about it. Okay, well, Ed Warren volunteered that they come over. Oh, we'll be over there. We'll come to the house. So we thought, as a team, this is grand. We've got the Warrens who lecture around the world. We've got the Warrens coming to this house. So we were tickled pink about that. And I remember being on the phone with Ed Warren and saying, now, I understand we're going to be working on this investigation together. Oh, yes, absolutely. We'd like our case. Yes, we want your case plan. And so they became involved with the case. I remember September 1973, greeting Ed and Lorraine as they pulled up onto the gravel driveway, and ushering them into the house, introducing them to Carolyn Perrin. And our team was there. And we were the team that was investigating the house. The Warrens were the guests. Okay, now I didn't know that day that would be the last time I would see Roger. Well, Roger wasn't there that day, but I would see Carolyn Perrin and the girls. That would be the last time I'd see them for the next 40 years, precisely 40 years. Because we did, and I thought, this is really in high gear now. And Carolyn Perrin and I used to speak on the phone every day. It was at least 3 weeks we were in touch every day. Sometimes wouldn't even talk much about the haunted house. We were just chatting. But, I was hearing more and more of what was happening in that house and the house's history, which Carolyn had researched. And suddenly no calls from Carolyn. I waited a couple of days, and I gave Carolyn, I'm busting to see, what do you think of the Warrens? Don't hear from Carolyn. I placed a call to her and left a message, no call back. So we had a meeting of our team, Pyro at Rhode Island College. We decided, look, either this has become intense and the Warrens are helping them, are very involved, or the conflict has been resolved. It's not an issue anymore. In any case, it seems this is done. Okay, now it was, probably 2 weeks afterwards. I think it was actually 16 days afterwards from the time we met the Warrens there. Carolyn Perrin called me, and she apologized for having been out of touch. And she told me that the Warrens told them, she and Roger, that they could be of no help unless they were the only paranormal investigators on the scene. We were just a bunch of college kids. We could only get in the way. So forget us and stick with Ed and Lorraine. So that's how we lost out on that case, very, very basically. I'll say that when we were investigating, it was an investigation. when the Warrens came into the scene, it ceased being an investigation and became an intercession, because right away, Ed and Lorraine adjudicated that situation as being demonic. The demon had to be driven out. So they took over and did their own thing, their own MO, which I didn't always agree with. I thought there was a lot more to research in that house rather than just ascribe to a demonic presence. So, and I'm talking about what really happened in this place. You know, the legend is built up around it. So how are Ed and Lorraine going to address this situation with Carolyn being taken over by this presence and it becoming more ominous and the girls are being upset? Well, how do you get rid of such a spirit? Have a seance. Call in another spirit. Have a seance to try and understand what's happening. I didn't agree with that at all. That's only going to stir things up. When I heard about it, I wasn't invited, and of course, and so on Devil's Night, traditional Devil's Night, October 30th, 1973, and of course it had to be at nighttime. The Warrens brought in their medium with whom they worked, brought in a priest, and they conducted an outright seance. Mind you, the Warrens would forbid anybody else, that you must never try to speak to the dead. But Lorraine conducted the seance, Ed was present, and they had a medium officiating. And at a certain point in this, they weren't really getting answers until Carolyn Perrin seemed to be taken over. Now, Carolyn was suggestible anyway, an emotional person. And Carolyn started to speak in, they said, an unknown language. Well, I think it's akin to speaking in tongues. And she went into a trance, started gibbering, and then Carolyn's body was propelled out of her chair, about 9 feet away into the next room, just flung out of the chair. I think it was like something that's sometimes called apportation, sometimes psychokinesis. Carolyn was thrown out of her chair into the next room. Now, Roger she was apparently unconscious. So her husband, Roger, ran over because Roger had come home during the seance. Or, when it was starting. So, all right, let them do their thing. I don't agree with it, but... Okay, so the seance goes wrong. Carolyn's thrown out of her chair, and Roger ran over to help his wife. She's been flung, about 9 feet away by some unseen force. So Ed tries to block his way, Ed Warren, and said, "You must never touch the possessed." Well, Roger had enough of this. And so Roger got up and he actually punched Ed. And as Roger says, he said, "Yeah, I think he lost that tooth after that." So that ended very badly. And he said, the Warrens, he wanted them out of the house. No more paranormal groups, no more parasite stuff in the house. However, strangely, the Warrens did return 2 days later, on November 1st. Carolyn must have told them that Roger would be out of the house, he'd be away on business. So the Warrens interviewed Carolyn. And it's a very leading interview. You can hear it on YouTube if you fish around for it. It's Ed Warren. "Now, my name is Ed Warren. You have called me, your name, Carolyn Perrin. You have called me in to help you." "Yes. Yes." So that's the basic thing. That's what happened there. And it became an entity unto itself. 40 years later, it's released as a movie, The Conjuring. Of course, a fictionalized account of it. And people who are, were very involved in the movie will say it was fictional. Except Lorraine Warren, because Ed had passed away in 2006. And Lorraine was quoted this recording of her saying, "That movie is as true to life as any movie could possibly be." So that's how the Conjuring became legendary, and the house is open for tours, very successful, very busy all the time. And they can pay their money, get a group together, and you can go and investigate the famous Conjuring house. Now, notice I'm being very detached when I'm talking about this. I'm trying to tell it like a police report. I'm not saying, good person, bad person. I'm saying it was handled irresponsibly, But that's how I came into contact with the parents and involved in the case. I will state that there is one person who, without that one person, none of this would have happened. There never would have been the movie made and the successive movies made. The Conjuring 1, 2, and 3. The Conjuring movie would not have been made were it not for this one person. You wouldn't have this tremendous franchise going on. Then another movie is in pre-production. I think they're filming it now. The Conjuring 4. How they're going to come up with another title for it. Without this one person, none of that would have happened. And that person is me. This is Carl. Because I happened to be at the lecture that Ed and Lorraine Warren gave, because I spoke with them, they seemed impressed with me, because I lectured with the Warrens a few times, and when they found out I was involved in this case in Harrisville, they thought it had to be something good, something of interest, something solid. I'm not boasting. I mean, that would be like boasting that I backed into a fire hydrant, because it has done me. It's renowned. A lot of people know, Tom. You know that.
I know
that I was involved from the start. If I had not attended the Warrens' lecture on that night, April, my brother is, encyclopedic retention, his memory. My brother would know the date. I don't know if it was the 14th or the 16th of April, 1972. If I hadn't gone to that lecture, nobody would ever have bought a ticket to The Conjuring, the movie. James Wan would not have directed this movie. Tony DeRosa Grun would not have created this concept or developed it, and gone to see Andrea Perrin and asked her to write a book, which would become the basis for a screenplay. Because the Warrens never would have been there. And the selling point for The Conjuring was that Ed and Lorraine Warren went there, investigated there. Heck, I knew the Warrens. They had dinner at my parents' house. That's my best memory of Ed and Lorraine Warren. They had dinner at my parents' house, and they're talking like my mother and father and Ed and Lorraine Warren. They're talking like old friends. It was a good experience, good memory. Now, Ed and Lorraine Warren did investigate my parents' house, but my parents never said they felt like they were being driven out of the house. Like, help us, help us. It was never that. If my parents had been, perturbed by the haunting we had in our house in Scituate, Rhode Island, they were kind of ambivalent to it. They knew something was going on. But if my parents felt they were being driven out of the house, then our house would have been The Conjuring. But my parents just weren't, that agitated by the paranormal activity. We thought it was a gas. We thought it was interesting. There's a lot to it, though. It's very complex. I can tell you, with more time, I could tell you why the parents felt how their issue needed to be addressed, what their real plans for the house were, how they came into ownership of that house. None of this was by chance. If you see the parents, as they were in the movie, if you see the parents' family portrayed as innocents that just moved into this house, and, a couple invested all their savings into the house, and then to their horror, they find out it's haunted. It's a virulent haunt. They're being driven out. They call in the experts. No, it's not exactly how it happened. None of that was by chance.
Nothing ever happens by chance.
Yeah.
Nothing ever happens by chance.
Right, I did play that intrinsic part, that vital part. I was the cog in the wheel that made that happen.
Right.
It's not that I said, hey, in 40 years, this is going to be a movie. But right. I did make certain decisions and took certain actions that established that as a house worthy of investigating.
Wow. So. Well, that's an interesting story, Colin. You always have great stories every time I have you on or we have you on.
I think
Thank you.
We really appreciate you coming on. It's probably one of the best interviews that I've had in a long time. Carl, would you be willing to come on again in a month or so and maybe elaborate on that story a little more for us?
Yeah, I would be delighted to, as a matter of fact. And I know I go on a long time, don't give you enough maybe enough time to ask enough questions.
No, you're great, Carl. That's why I had you on. We have you on the first show because, you know, we wanted to kick the show off with greatness, and that's you.
Yeah, it was great. Carl,
thank you.
If listeners wanted to get in touch with you or maybe buy your book or whatever, where would people turn to?
Well, I did author a book. I co-authored a book. It is called Shadow Realms Demonology Handbook. It's available through myself, the author. I authored that with Lana Brock. And you can get that through Amazon.com or contact me. My team now is Panorama Paranormal. And I investigate with Elise Gianmarco Carlson. She's land evidence specialist and historian, and she's done a lot of research into the background of the house in Harrisville, Round Top Road. So through Panorama Paranormal, our website is all contiguous, panoramaparanormal.com. We were lucky to get it that simple. It's an HTTP, but just enter panoramaparanormal.com and you'll find us. Also, I am on Facebook, the ubiquitous Facebook. I'm not that hard to find. So you can request for me a copy of Shadow Realms. I can order my copy.
We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Carl. It was a great episode, so we thank you for episode number 1.